Hello YouTube, this is Dozer here, bringing a different video for you today. I've been doing a lot of gameplay videos this week and doing some deck techs, but I thought I'd take some time, take a step back from doing all that for a day to try and make a video to explain a lot of my thought process behind of how I've been building my decks and kind of where I see the value of different cards for Prism in the current Flesh and Blood metagame for July 2021. So we're still pre Tales of Aria and we're post Monarch, and we're actually still pre Crucible Unlimited. So this is going to be me talking about every card that I have seriously considered running in Prism and kind of going through my opinions on each of them. So and making a little bit of a tier list. So here we go. We'll start out, just do it all alphabetically. You've got a number of, her class cards with the Illusionists, the Lights, and the Light Illusionist cards, as well as a host of generics which have been a cut above the rest of the generics. And so we'll start with Arcanite Skullcap. So Skullcap is a fantastic card. Um, it lets us block for like 3 extra HP in a game for our head slot. Um, Extra HP that you don't have to block with from hand is always good. And in a matchup where you are trying to survive, it can be very good. You might think, well, Dozer, why don't we run it in the tank build? Well, you can, but the idea of the tank build is that you're supposed to be at higher HP than your opponent the entire time. So we won't get the maximum benefit out of the skull cap, so you're really only going to block for 1 damage until you get behind, and you'll be able to block for 1 more damage rather than being able to tank some hits, get the 2 block, and then the 1 block, and really get your value out of the card. So I'm not a big fan of Skullcap. It doesn't really synergize with what we're trying to do, but it is a good card, and against certain matchups, I could definitely see it being a really useful inclusion. So I would go ahead and put it under A tier because it is a great card, it's a great option, but it's not auto-include, and it's not something you need to have to play Prism. Then the next thing here is going to be Null Rune Glove. So Null Rune Glove is an exceptional piece of armor for Prism because there's so much competition for the other slots, and that this is the hands is the most flexible slot for us. And so I would normally say that we would want to use the Null Rune Gloves if we're using any Null Rune at all, and it helps us versus Chain. It helps us in the Prism Mirror match. It helps us against any other arcane damage dealing classes very efficiently. So I would go ahead and put it at S tier. Again, the biggest thing is when we're protecting our prismatic shield tokens, we need to be able to block every single thing out there to be able to make sure that we keep them alive. And the only thing that we don't have in the main board normally as Prism is a way to mitigate arcane damage. So being able to use a pretty free hand slot to do that and keep our shield pressure up is incredibly valuable. Um, Additionally, we can take a look at Command and Conquer. I'm not very big on Command and Conquer in Prism personally. It's a good card, but it's not auto-include by any means. I mean, it's definitely a powerful card, but when you're playing against classes that don't really rely on the arsenal, Prism being one of them, it just doesn't get a lot of value. Essentially, it's a vanilla that, yes, it can pop the prismatic or the phantasms, but more often than not, you're not going to get the full value out of this card, and you could run more synergistic options rather than just having a quote unquote good stuff card. But it is quite good at being a quote good stuff card, so we will put it into A tier because it is a very strong card, but not on include by any means. Pursuit of Knowledge is a card that I have been testing for a long time, but I wasn't really sold on it until I really reevaluated my list here for Tank Prism and found that while yeah, you have Energy Potion and Energy Potion can be great, a lot of the times you're just pitching it, and in the late game, the last thing you want to be doing is drawing an Energy Potion. And a lot of times you don't really want to be playing an Energy Potion if you're playing a card. So um, while it's nice to be able to have it as like a one-of option, and I still would recommend having Energy Potion at some number in any Prism list because of how flexible it is. Pursuit of Knowledge is effectively another copy of Erudition because it attacks for 4, and if it hits, it gets us an extra intellect for that turn, so we can drop to 5 cards. It attacks for 4 and blocks 2 and only costs 2, and pitches blue, so it's a really, really flexible card for Prism. And even if you don't feel like attacking with it that turn, You can pitch it as part of your Phantasmal Footsteps trigger plus your next Herald, and it really baits your opponent and forces them to block this card, because the last thing they want to give a defensive player is more cards to block with. So being able to threaten 2 cards out of their hand or a card in armor is really huge for just controlling the tempo of the game. And I would honestly say that you have to find a really good reason not to include Pursuit of Knowledge in Prism, just because of how flexible it is and how, even if you're playing an aggressive Prism, being able to set up for a bigger turn on the next turn, like you can do a, you know, a Judgment or a Triumph into a Pursuit of Knowledge, and if they don't basically full block that turn, you're just going to come at them even stronger next turn. So I would definitely put it into S tier. I would run at least 2 of this in any Prism list that I could, if not 3. I think it's an amazing card, and I feel like if you're not running it, you have to have a really good reason for why you're not including it. Then Chains of Eminence, awesome card, red pitch, 0 cost, 2 block action. Synergizes extremely well with what Prism's trying to do, and I think it's a very powerful card. Unfortunately, it can be a dead draw a lot of the time because of the pitch value, so I would go ahead and say that you should probably only run this in the sideboard into certain matchups, and only really if you're maxing out on your ability to hand grief your opponent. I would say it's a B tier card. It's strong when it's strong, but it's really weak when it's weak, and you don't always want to see it. So I would definitely think about including it in your lists, but I wouldn't call it an auto-include by any means. Yellow Plunder Run is similarly good when it's good, but really bad when it's bad. And I think they're just much better cards, so I'm going to put it into C tier here. And honestly, almost D tier, because it's playable. It's decent when it works, but a lot of the time you would rather, like, even if you're Plunder Run from Arsenal into Erudition, right? Like, that's really strong. But like, most of the time Prism wants to arsenal her instants because they can't block. She can activate them in response to her opponent playing Art of War, or Command and Conquer rather, and that's where she can really get a lot of value out of that slot while maintaining more block or defense reactions even. So Plunder Run, while a very good card, and the yellow version's perfectly fine for what Prism's trying to do, I wouldn't want to put it in my arsenal, right? So I would put it in D tier. It's playable, but not great. Red Push the Point, I would say, is um, A tier card for Prism. When you're playing a cheap list, like a low to the ground wide list, it's so easy to turn this on with your spectral shields that being able to push through that extra damage is so relevant in those hyper aggressive matchups. You wouldn't run this in every Prism list though. It's not like it's an auto include or something. It's just very powerful when it's strong, and you can fit it into some lists, and in those decks it's a 3 of, just because of how efficient it is at racing people. Yellow and red Paper Scene are going to be like S tier cards. They're really strong, being able to help you determine what you're going to play next turn. You can combo it with Sink Below, and they block for exactly what you want. Either they block for 4 for 0, or they block for 3 in our yellow pitch. So super flexible, awesome card. The only reason you would take any of them out is because you're trying to go more aggressive, and in that point you would cut one of the colors in order to have a bit more attack actions in your deck. Beyond that, we got the 3 Whispers of the Oracle. I'm going to go ahead and say that yellow and blue are S tier, and that red is A tier. Um, Prism is one of the characters that cares the most about the arrangement of the cards in her hand. She has like the fewest interchangeable cards of any character I've seen, and being able to determine what you're going to play on the next turn is so vital for her, while still being able to block 3, while still being able to pitch for a ton of resource, and comboing with your other cards like Erudition or Tome of Divinity. Um, it's an incredible card, and the red's really good too. It's just hard to fit it into decks when the blue and the yellow exist as well. Um, if the yellows and blues didn't exist, I'd run the red, like if it was a majestic or something. But luckily for us, it's a common, so we get to play it with 6 copies. Although I wouldn't play more than 6. I don't think that's wise. Um, so then after that, we have Snag. So Snag is a counter. It's like a tech card to help counter certain strategies. It doesn't really work versus Warrior because it doesn't work on weapons, but you can stop attack actions from gaining tons of attack in a turn. So stuff like Ranger, stuff like Chain, obviously with Rift Binds, it can get you a lot of value there, but it doesn't block. it does pitch blue, but a lot of the times you don't want this card in your hand at the wrong time, and when you do need it, um, it's pretty good, but you could do the same thing with a lot of other cards as far as like you have to run 3 snag if you want to see it in the matchups where you need it. And again, if you see it at the wrong time, it's kind of just a dead card for us because we don't really love the blue pitch. We much prefer it to be yellow pitch. Like if it was yellow pitch, it'd be awesome. Like I'd run it for sure. But it's not. So there are better cards for us, and I think that it kind of falls in the same category as Chains of Eminence, where yeah, it's good when it's good, but if it's bad, it's really bad. So you have to really have free space in your sideboard to then try and play around setting this up. That's the other thing about Prism. Like these tech cards are really solid when you get to hold them and play them at the right time. But Prism's hands, by nature of the fact that she has so much like reliance on being combo heavy, as far as being able to play blues off of a soul trigger into an aura, or being able to play multiple yellow heralds in a turn, um, by pitching the yellows for the go again, you're just really not expected to get a ton of value out of the out of holding a card for a long time, unless you're in a hyper slow matchup where you can do something like holding a Cataclysm to pop up Prism's Phantasm. Because in that case, the payoff's really worth it, and you can get the momentum back. With Snag, you're not really getting the momentum back. You're really just slowing them down to try and waste some of their value. And honestly, Chain can play around Snag by just using fewer seeds on a turn. Like if they're thinking you're holding one of these, then they can just play like 1 or 2 seeds and come at you slightly wider and save 2 for later. They don't have to commit all of them at once. Um, so there's counterplay for them for sure. And in the meantime, it's not doing anything for us. Lunging Press is a very interesting card. I think for Prism, it's especially good because when you are attacking with all these very threatening on hits, like with Protection, with Erudition, with Judgment, um, the most important thing is that you just get the hit. It doesn't matter how much damage you deal, we're not caring about Crush. We just care about whether or not we hit. So Lunging Press is a blue pitch that blocks for 2 attack reaction, costs 0, does 1 damage. Um, I would really suggest running Lunging Press if you're doing an aggressive build, because not only does it help us pitch for blue to be able to pay for our anti-phantasm popping cards like Footsteps and Blinding Beam, but it also allows us to go over the top of other strategies. Like if you throw a Erudition at someone, how much are they going to block for? Either they're going to grossly overblock or they're going to block for 5 if they can. They're not going to try and inefficiently block Erudition. And if you can Lunging Press on top of that, get the on hit, get the soul trigger, and draw your cards, I mean, you're really in the driver's seat at that point. So, especially for something like Judgment, Judgment's really good at 6 attack because if they block it for 6, like a chain for instance, and you Lunging Press it, um, they got rid of their husk, and they still can't play out advantage next turn, so you've slowed them down. And that in itself is just really awesome. Very flexible card. I would put it into solid like A tier. We're gonna have to start delineating some of these, I think. So we're gonna put like the situationally good cards into C tier. The cards that work in theory but end up being suboptimal are gonna go down to D tier. We're gonna put good cards in B tier here, and we're gonna save A tier for cards that are really good for Prism, but not something you want to like max out on or something that's like vital every matchup, right? So we're gonna put Skullcap here, Command and Conquer here. We're gonna put Push the Point here, and we're gonna put Lunging Press here. We're gonna leave Whispers here because that card's awesome, and I'm just a big fan of it. Springboard Somersault, I think this card's extremely overrated. Blocking for 2 out of hand and pitching yellow is not worth taking up our arsenal slot. We have much better things to put there, so I'm going to put that into the D tier with Plunder Run. Great Library of Solana. It's a Fabled. It's a good card. It's not auto-include by any means, and it's not even that great when you do land it. Your opponent can benefit from it, and most of the time that you resolve it, especially in the tanky build of Prism, you don't even get to draw off of it because you have to be pitching cards on your turn, which means you have to be playing your cards, which means you can't be blocking. So for Prism, I would highly recommend only playing Library in a deck that is all aggro, just playing 2 yellows a turn, dropping Heralds, and then it can work, but I mean, that's a pretty binary linear playstyle, and I wouldn't recommend doing that, but Library is good at doing that. I put it into C tier for that reason. Luminaris, S tier. I don't think much needs to be said about Luminaris. It's in fact just like the craziest card ever in Prism. Um, like the fact that it allows us to attack so much in one turn and turn our auras into little pings that are free, it's really insane. Luminaris is S tier. Erudition also S tier. We love this card. You have to have a really good reason not to run this in Prism. It's extremely powerful. Draws 2, has Dominate. It's super threatening. Arclight Sentinel. I'm gonna put this into A tier. It's really good in some matchups and really bad in others. And it's flexible enough as a yellow that we can pitch it while paying for it with vestige triggers pretty easily. So it's a fantastic card, but it's not something you want to run against everybody. Judgment's in a similar vein where it's a good card. Like you're never going to be sad to have it in your deck, and you definitely want to have it in your sideboard. But it's really only relevant versus like Chain, Kano, and like Dorinthia and Katsu, because they're the ones that play from Banished. So being able to um, have this in your sideboard is important, but I wouldn't main this unless you're really just trying to fit in more cards into your list overall. Then you can sacrifice a couple Yellow Heralds to put Judgment into the main board while allowing for more tech options. Triumph, I'm really not big on Triumph of really any color. I think it's a decent card, but I would pretty much just put it into like B or C tier. I'm gonna put the red Triumphs into C tier, the yellow into B, and the blue into B. I tend to value yellow and blue heralds a lot more than the others because they're more flexible in how you can play out your turns. But Triumph on itself, like on its own, it doesn't do anything, right? Like yes, it can attack without getting stopped, but unless you can put a really relevant on hit effect onto it, like a Plunder Run or something, it doesn't really get you a lot of value, and it's super easy for them to block. So um, while it's decent, you can also just run 7 attacks. Like there are tons of generic red 7 attacks that people can run that will just bypass all the benefit of Triumph anyway. So I wouldn't even consider running Triumph in any list right now. There has to be a really, really good on hit effect that you can give it for that to be the case for us to run it. And we got the four cost auras. I'm gonna say all of these are A tier cards, even Parable, just because of how when they are all together, they're extremely powerful. And in certain matchups, they're just backbreaking. Against the classes that can't deal with them, they really just snowball and win you the game. And even in other matchups, they're very playable in the right ratios. So I would probably say Merciful is the best one, followed by Genesis, followed by Parable, followed by Ode. Um, that being said, I wouldn't run like more copies of Genesis than Parable, depending on the matchup. It all just kind of depends on what your deck's trying to do and what your opponent's matchup is. But I would definitely say that these are really great cards. And if I can rearrange like the tiers later, but for right now, this is pretty accurate. Um, protection's like A or S tier card, like every color. This is the card that you want to have 3 of if you have any 3 of Herald, because it's just by numbers the most raw value. And in fact, we can just go ahead and put War Tune up there too. War Tune and Protection are by far the best heralds, and we love putting as many of them as we can into our lists that we can fit. Ravages, I think Ravages is a really good card as like an extra copy of Protection just for the grind game. Again, the big combo of like triple tome turns with Ode to Wrath turns Ravages into a hyper efficient card. And you wouldn't really want to run the reds. I mean, the red is basically just an Enigma Chimera, and in a hyper aggressive list, you're not trying to run Genesis or things that care about being light anyway. So I would basically not even think about running the reds. The yellows are fine. Like you can run the yellows in like most lists just for the yellow pitch and the block and everything. It's flexible, but I wouldn't really say it's that great. I'd say the blue Ravages is A tier. Like you can definitely find room for it in your decks, but it's not something you want to cut other things for. Uh, Rebirth is in the same vein where Blue Rebirth is very strong. Yellow Rebirth is fine, and Red Rebirth is not really advisable. Just for the same reasons, basically. Like you always want to be able to have blue pitch heralds, and these are some of the better ones, but um, its on hit effect will rarely go off because of how easy it is to block, and it's not terribly threatening until the end game anyway. So you don't really want the reds because you're not going to be able to play them early to get value out of them. And then the yellows and blues are good, but not auto include by any means. Though They are some of the most solid bread and butter cards. Tenacity is a weird one. Blue Tenacity is probably one of like the worst heralds, just because like yeah, it's um it's a blue that has 4 attack and dominate, which is like great to deal 1 damage or something, but like unless you're stacking tons of attack buffs onto tenacities, it's not good at all. Pretty much in any case, because it's just less efficient than your other heralds. So unless you're playing a hyper aggressive list, it's not really that good. And even in those lists, it's cost 2 just for dominate. So I mean, you'd rather play a more damage heavy list, especially when you're racing someone. Like if they're not going to block at all, dominate doesn't matter. You'd rather have that into damage. Um, so while it's a decent card, I guess the yellow might be okay in some matchups. I really wouldn't recommend picking tenacity over other options for heralds when you're making your lists. So then we can get out of the light illusionist cards and get into the light cards. So vestige is S tier. Um, Nothing really needs to be said about vestige. It's produces so many extra resources in the game for you. You can block with it if you have to once you've kind of gotten your big combos off. And it combos super well with Halo, and Halo is also S tier. It's really hard to justify not running Halo because of how flexible it is. Putting cards into your soul to give you an outlet to turn on all of your go again is huge, while also allowing you to set up giant turns with Vestige in order to just pop off with Tome of Divinity. Um, Celestial Cataclysm is a great card in Prism, but it's very matchup dependent. I would say it's A tier. Like you really need this against Prism, but against other matchups, it's not that great. It depends on the build though. It can be an aggressive card. It can be a defensive card. It's very flexible. It's very good. Definitely getting close to that auto include territory, but not quite in the main board. Soul Shield's S tier. This card's incredible as well. It's a guaranteed way to get a card into Soul, so you can have your Spectral Shield access and turn on your go agains. It blocks for 6 by only costing 2 resources. It's a yellow pitch. Like this is one of the best cards in that Prism has access to, and it's not even an illusionist card. It's a light card, so definitely a card to keep your eye on for other light heroes if they ever make more. Soul Food in Prism, I think, is very bad. Like I would never want to take a whole turn to even like the second half of a turn to put some cards into Soul. Like I would never do that. I would always rather play a different thing. So unless we really get some good ways to have Soul outlets that are better value than Cataclysm, Soul Food's just is 0 tempo card that like in a hero that doesn't need that, right? We can do that offensively. So I would go ahead and put Soul Food into D tier. Like we don't have Luminous Ascension. If we had Luminous Ascension, we could consider Soul Food because we really need those soul charges. But like for Prism, it's just we can only spend 1 a turn. So stacking that many is just completely unnecessary. Tome of Divinity is S tier. This card is easily like one of the strongest cards that Prism has access to, just because the fact that she loves pitching yellow, she loves putting cards into Soul, and she loves being able to go into the late game where she can stack multiple tomes into a chain together, and that's incredibly powerful. You're never sad to see tome. You should really always think about including it unless you have a really good reason not to. Invigorating lights are okay. I would say these are like the red one is probably B tier, and then the others are probably in C tier. Like you can consider running them, but unless you're playing against a hyper grindy matchup where you're not ever going to hit with your heralds, it costs 3 resource to attack for suboptimal damage, and it doesn't work when you're ahead because if you already have cards in your soul, it won't go into your soul. So um, while it works well from behind or at even, when you are winning, you never really want to be playing this card. So the red can be used to pop phantasms, but I've really lost a lot of my taste for this card, and I don't think it's as good as I originally once thought. Then we got Glisten. So I think red Glisten, it's not very good. I put it in D tier. Like you don't need the extra 1 token, and the red pitch is really crippling for Prism because of how inflexible it is. But yellow Glisten, I think you have to make a really strong case to not run it, at least in your sideboard, but definitely your main board, it's good too. Putting your spectral shields or auras up to a breakpoint of 4 damage is crazy to be able to swing for free with every turn. You effectively just give yourself Nebula Blade or Romping Club or all these things, and you can make it even bigger over time. And since we're protecting our spectral shields in the tank build, it's incredibly good in that too. Blue Glisten is okay. I mean, you can consider running it. I would say it's probably in like the B tier category, just because it pitches blue. You can use it to pay for auras and things, but um, you should really only ever run 3 Glisten. You shouldn't run 6. You'll just have too many cards that don't do anything, and then you won't be able to block for the cards that you put the Glisten on. So Blue Glisten is potentially okay, but I wouldn't really consider running it. I'll even drop down to C tier because of that. Like it's really not nearly as good as Yellow Glisten. Then we got Illuminates. I think Illuminate Red is good. Yellow is really good, and I would say Blue is also really good. Um, and I'll try and just speed up through some of these thought processes here. Illuminate doesn't let us spend pitch, so we can't get go again, so it doesn't make the cut over other cards. But if we need more blues or we need more yellows, it's one of the first things we want to think about including because of how awkward it is for our opponent to block it. Like, do they really want to block and illuminate? They don't really. So we want to make sure that we are thinking about illuminate whenever we need to fill in some more light cards, or just to get more cards into soul generally. Um, this next card here is uh, oh, what's that card called? Basically, it is a weak attack that costs 2, and it blocks for 2, but it gains +2 defense if your opponent's banished a card that turn. So I don't think it's good at all. I think it's a really bad card. It's inefficient to attack with. It's inefficient to block with, unless you're playing against specifically Chain or like maybe Katsu or something. So I would just never run that card ever. It costs 2 as well with no go again or anything, and it has to hit. No, it doesn't even go to soul, so no, it's bad. I would say Rising Solar Tide is a consideration. Being able to be a 1 for 5, 4, 3, depending on the pitch, to go into soul is really good because like you can run the yellows um, to get soul triggers, and it blocks for 3, so it's like an efficient card. But a lot of the times, I would rather be running like push the point in a more aggressive list, use that one resource, or I would rather be playing Illuminate for the free card. So this is a really awkward breakpoint for how little damage it does. I'd say the red's probably better than the blue, but I wouldn't really think about running these cards pretty much ever. Seek Enlightenment's kind of the same thing. It's like it costs resource to give a buff of attack and let something go to soul, but like we are all of our cards already go to soul, so we don't really need to buff something. Like until we get a generic that Prism really likes running, we don't need to buff it with this card. We can use more efficient buffs than this. So I'm just gonna put it here for now. Blinding Beam, I'm big on Blinding Beam. I think red Blinding Beam is unnecessary. Again, the pitch flexibility is bad. Yellow Blinding Beam is awesome. And blue Blinding Beam is also awesome. I would really consider running Blinding Beam and yellow Blinding Beam in the same lists. Just because getting to push damage through 6 breakpoints while also being able to pitch is just really strong. I think Blinding Beam Yellow and Blue are extremely good and are worth considering in any Prism list. Ray of Hope is, on the other hand, really bad. Never run this card. It basically is just a worse Art of War with way fewer options. Like, you should just never run this card. Iris of Reality is not great in Prism. Luminaris is just so much better. For Prism specifically, I would never run Iris of Reality when I have access to Luminaris because you need to have cards to pitch to pay for your attacks with Iris. And if you are pitching, that means you had a card that you didn't have to block with before because it costs 3 to attack for 4 damage. And yeah, it has go again if you use the Iris, but like Prism can't protect her Spectras at all without Arclight Sentinel, and she can't protect her Spectral Shields if she's saving cards for pitch. So unless you have a way to just pump out Spectral Shields, even then you still only can do like 4 attacks on a turn, so 16 damage with like a full blue hand and a full. It just a lot of conditions need to be met, and it's really awkward as a result. Footsteps is S tier. No surprise. It's core to Prism. It blocks. It gives us our action point back if they pop our Phantasm. It's extremely good for insurance, and you have to really have a good reason not to run it. Dreamweavers is a good card. I don't think it's auto include. I think you can make an argument for it being in like A tier because it is just so synergistic, but it really has to be in the right list where you are really relying on like making a single big pivotal hit or at least saving it just to threaten someone where it's like, even if they have a 6 blocker, they still can't stop your attack. So if you have really threatening attacks like a pumped up Erudition or a pumped up Judgment or something, that's really when you need Dreamweavers. Phantasmaclasm's S tier. This card's awesome. Like, the fact that even if there's a card that said pay 3, shuffle a card, well, not shuffle, but put a card from your opponent's hand on the bottom of their deck and let them draw a card, go again, I'd play that for 3 resource. I totally would. That's an awesome effect in like a controlling environment. Just mess with someone, and the fact that you get to see their whole hand and get a feel for what they have access to in their next turn, the fact that it does 9 damage is a complete upside. I don't even factor that into my evaluation of the card. Like, that card is bonkers. It's like stupid good. The only reason I wouldn't run 3 of it is because of the red pitch and the fact that you can't um, play it very efficiently if you have like all 3 in your hand or even 2 in your hand reliably. So I would want to keep it down to 2 copies just so I don't see too many of them. But it is a fantastic card. Beyond that, we're almost done with the Illusionist here. Prismatic Shield's really easy. Red is S tier, yellow's B tier, and blue is D tier. Never run the blue; it's terrible in Prism. The red is awesome. You would always want to like have this in pretty much any deck list. And then yellow is situational. Phantasmify. Phantasmify yellow, I think, is a lot better than the others. I would say red is next best, and then blue, never run. It doesn't give you the extra pitch for being blue, and you could just run like other cards instead. Enigma Chimera, it's a similar thing. Like, it's a decent card, but it doesn't really synergize with what we're trying to do. Um, it's efficient, but like Ravages is equally as efficient in most cases and has the upside of being light. So much better to have Ravages there. Spears of Surreality is an awesome card. I would say it easily makes its way into A tier for the yellows and reds, then the blue never run. In the right list and an aggressive list, it's very strong. So I would say to make sure to include those if you're trying to go like hyper aggro Prism. Ironhide Gauntlets. This is actually a card I think is worth a consideration in some lists, kind of on the same vein as like Skullcap and things like that. Because in a matchup where they'd have 0 arcane damage accessible to them, being able to pitch a blue and have 2 extra block in combination, let's say, with your footsteps on a turn, can be really pivotal. And Prism doesn't really have a lot of great options in the hands at the moment otherwise, so as a defensive option, I think Ironhide Gauntlets are actually worth running in niche scenarios, but it's hard to find a place for them in your deck, so um, I wouldn't bend over backwards to try and fit it or anything. Exude Confidence isn't great in Prism, but the fact that we can buff it and just kind of have this crazy huge attack, it's a good card. Like, you could run it. Nourishing Emptiness is like the same thing. We banish cards because like if our heralds hit, they go to our souls. So it's not that hard to turn this card on, but it's not something you would want to bend backwards over running. I mean, it'd probably go down to C tier just because of that, because it's how unreliable it is. And honestly, Exude probably would too, but they're considerations that you could make at some point. Captain's Call red and yellow are really good. I'd say the yellow wins out among them all, and then red is like just a good card. Giving your heralds +2 for free can be really scary in the right hand, especially if you have a card you're playing from Arsenal that turn. So you could have 2, like a yellow and a blue to pitch or something. And the yellow being able to pitch while still giving go again to things is definitely useful in a more aggressive list where you have more generics. But most of the time, you wouldn't really want to put Captain's Call in over other cards. So definitely a decent inclusion. Hope Merchant's Hood, I mean, it's okay. Cross Strap is okay. Goliath Gauntlet is better than okay, but it's matchup dependent. And it's hard to find a slot for it in your deck. But these other cards are very good in Blitz, where the game lasts like 3 or 4 turns. But in CC, you need stuff that gives you value over time, or really key pivotal value. It's reliable. Enlightened Strike, like I never want to play Enlightened Strike in Prism. It is very bad to get rid of a whole card to do 1 attack, even if it's like a 5 go again or a 7 attack. We're trying to pitch efficiently. So, if we were running a ton of reds, Enlightened Strike would be really good because it would effectively be whatever that card is for 1. But for Prism, we want to be playing a card, pitch a card, play a card, pitch a card, or pitch one card to play two cards. So Enlightened Strike just doesn't fit that for us. And so even though it's a really good efficient card, I would basically put in the same tier as um, like Plunder Run. Honestly, like for Prism, it just doesn't do anything that she wants to do. So even though it's a good card, it's not helping us enough to be worth running. Tome of Findal, on the other hand, is quite interesting for Prism. It's kind of like another version of Tome, and it can provide a lot of healing and late game value. The problem with Tome of Findal is that you need to run time snaps to make it worth playing for Prism, and in the late game, you are running out of cards more than you are not having enough cards to draw. So Tome of Findal has kind of some like negative synergy, and I would much prefer running like other cards over it, but it is interesting and I have started testing it, so I would put it into the low B tier. Like it could make the cut in some lists, but it's a hyper defensive card. You really have to set up for it. And even then it's kind of like a pie in the sky Magic Christmas Land card. Um, and we'll put Time Snap right with her because those cards kind of are bundled together. Um, Remembrance, on the other hand, I think is definitely an A tier card for Prism. Being able to pitch yellow while also ensuring our late game um, is really important because we don't have a weapon that we can attack with for free infinitely. You know, Luminaris is very powerful, but we can't just pitch a blue and swing every turn in the grind scenario. So being able to get our powerful cards back in the end game is incredibly strong, and it pitches yellow too, which is a bonus. Energy Potion, I'd also say it's like A tier. Like you have to have a really good reason not to run this card, but um, it's not something you want to have like a 3 of in every case. It's just very powerful for Prism. Sigil of Solace, I used to be interested in this card, but I think it's very matchup specific, and I would put it in the same category as like Chains of Eminence. Raging Onslaught Red, this card's awesome. I would run it in every Prism list ever as a sideboard card. It's not for every matchup, but it beats Herald of Triumph. It basically makes Prism's life a living hell, and it even blocks for 3 and attacks for 7. So against like a Bravo who are not going to be able to hit with anything anyway, you may as well throw a 7 at him and block up um, if the Aura build stops working as well. Let's see here. Yellow Onslaught I think is okay, but I wouldn't really run it anymore. It doesn't stop Triumph, and yeah, it pitches yellow, but in that matchup, you never want to be pitching your 6 attacks because that's what you need to stop the Prism from attacking you. So I would basically never run the yellow anymore, but it's an okay inclusion if you have room for it. And then we got the pummels. So yellow pummel's the best pummel if you're going to run it. I think it makes its way into like the good category. I think blue pummel is better than red pummel, and I think red pummel and blue pummel are about the same usefulness. Um, the yellow pitch is really vital for the blue pummel. I mean, for pummel just generally, you want the go again accessible, you want the flexibility, and you don't need that much attack to get over people because of the breakpoints that we have. So um, you can run it. I don't like running it. I think there are much better cards to run than pummel in CC. Although in Blitz it's awesome. Razor Reflex, red and yellow. It's not great. It's kind of in the same category as the other pummels because you would rather spend that one resource to attack with a 6+ attack card, and you don't really need the go again. So I would not really recommend running Razor Reflex. Unmovable Yellow is really good. I would say that's probably like an A tier card in certain matchups, like against Bravo, against things that just make one big attack. Um, Effectively having some slightly more expensive soul shields lying around is always good, and you can definitely have it as a legitimate inclusion in any deck for Prism in the sideboard. Sink Below, this card is S tier. This card's awesome. It fixes your hands when you have auras that you can't block with. It lets you filter your hand and just always have the best options. So, and it blocks efficiently for 4 and 3. Pitches yellow. Sink Below is awesome. And we got Nimblism red and yellow. I think Nimblism red's better than yellow. I think you would realistically only run the reds in a hyper aggro build. And then the Nimblism yellow, I would just like never run. They're just better cards. Like Captain's Call yellow is strictly better than Nimblism yellow in every case for Prism. So like you're never running the Nimble Strike. You're just caring about the extra damage for efficiency. So that's the overall tier list. Now we can start organizing the tiers based on the things within the tiers. Um, I think anything in S tier you can make an argument for running. I don't think we have to really debate over what's better in S tier. They're all good. Um, The only things I would say that you don't really need to run in multiples, I guess, would be the blinding beams, the glistens, um, like in every matchup for anything. Pursuit of Knowledge is definitely the bottom of S tier. Fate Pristine Yellow is at the bottom of S tier. Null Rune Glove is good. All these others are good, and I think Sink Below is probably right up here. So yeah, I would say this is pretty accurate for S tier here, and then for A tier, um, I would pretty much leave these cards in most of the order here. I mean, they become pretty interchangeable towards the end. Like maybe you can put Energy Potion up here, maybe you can put Remembrance up here. Captain's Call can go, probably here, and Immovable can go, here. But generally speaking, this is pretty accurate. Um, Skull Cap is great. Command and Conquer is great. Pummels are good. Gauntlets are good. And again, these are all matchup dependent, but I mean, I would put these equipments at the bottom. Like, it's really hard to justify running them until unless you have a very specific matchup for it. Um, in any matchup where you'd want Skull Cap, you'd want the Iron Hides. Like, you'd want the extra block. We'll put these guys up here. We'll put kind of the rest of it like this. Honestly, we'll do that. Probably put these up here. This can go here, that's fine. And then we'll do that. So then we can do C tier here. We'll put all the heralds over these other generic cards. Like, you're never going to be sad to run light cards in Prism. In library, Chains of Eminence, like these hard counter cards, like the tech options. Sigil of Solace, Pummels, Razors can go at the bottom. Enigma Chimera is definitely better than Nourishing for Prism. And then these equipments are kind of okay. And then for these other cards, I don't think D tier really matters. If I had to say, Enlightened Strike, Plunder Run, Glisten, probably Red Blinding Beam, probably Blue Spears. And then the rest of this is just like chaff. I mean, these I think it's like a pilgrimage or something card or something. It's really just not good. Definitely better than this Ray of Hope card though. It's such a meme. This point doesn't really matter, so we'll just cut it there. And we'll just say that thanks for watching, guys. This has been fun to do. Hopefully you got some good insight out of this. I'll be posting a link to this list in the comments, or the description rather. And if you think that you have some other opinions on these cards and you would like to do this tier list yourself, I'll post a link to it in the description as well, and you can feel free to comment your link to yours, and I can take a look at it and see if you've made an argument that might change my opinion. So thanks for watching again, and hope to catch you in the next video. Peace.